guys, welcome to Zandvoort. Deep dive time. Let's see if I can get through this before I have to go make dinner. I didn't leave myself as much time as I would have liked, but there it is. Okay, Zandvoort. Zandvoort is a hard track, but it's a lot of fun. It's a great racetrack, possible to pass on. So you better be prepared to be patient. And I'll tell you this at the outset: because it's such a technical track, you're probably far better off working on consistency than you are working on pure pace. Okay, because almost all of the passing that's done in this weekend's race is going to be due to a mistake from the guy who is in front of the guy who passes you. So you're not going to make a lot of on-track whiz-bang passes. It's not going to happen, not on Zandvoort. You will, however, screw up frequently if you don't respect the track and allow people to get past you that way. So whatever your pace is, make sure it's a pace that you can sustain virtually error-free. Otherwise, you're going to wreck your race. The other thing I want to caution before I really get started into the deep dive itself is I want to give you a huge caution for the start of the race, because this track is far more dangerous for race starts than I think a lot of people give it credit for. Everybody thinks terrifying start, and they think of Monza and turn one. And while that's absolutely true, the danger here lasts for four corners. And if you don't respect that, you're going to end yours or someone else's race before you ever get done with the first lap. And let me explain what I mean. Zandvoort is not a wide track. Okay, so you have your very standard T1 hairpin that always causes issues because people everywhere from row 2 on back don't respect the fact that this is a very tight track, that tires are cold and that brakes are cold, and they don't leave enough space, and boom, somebody gets rear-ended and taken out. So you've got that very standard thing, right? Second of all, because it's narrow, you're going to have the heroes who love to go three wide at the start. If you do that on this track, I think you're a fool, personally, because it is not wide enough, and you narrow down so much on the entry to T1 that you're begging for a disaster. If you think about, say, T1 at Nürburgring, which is also a turn one hairpin, right? And think about how wide that track is, and it actually does open up the possibility of going three wide, if everybody's minding their P's and Q's. You don't have that luxury here at T1. If you are three wide as you go under the brakes here, everyone has to be perfect to avoid disaster. And if you think myself or anyone else in this community is perfect enough to pull that off with any kind of confidence, I think you're dreaming. So turn one, there's your first disaster waiting to happen, right? As soon as you get out of it, guess what? The track gets even narrower. And you come up to one of the trickiest corners that are on the track. If you've all been practicing here this week, you know how hard this corner is. There is no margin for error. Which means that on lap one, when everyone is still bunched up and the tires are still cold, you have to be more careful through this corner, or you're going to instantly put yourself off of the track, right? That means that whatever braking marker you have in your head for your lap, throw it away at the entry as you're approaching this corner. You have to be braking much easier because everyone is going to be going significantly slower than you normally would coming up here, which means the concertina effect is still huge as you approach here, okay? I can't tell you how many times I see somebody rear-ended going into this corner because people do not respect it enough, right? What happens? Somebody gets punted right here, right? Or because someone is being too aggressive, they either catch the curb or just run too wide on the exit. They get off into the grass. Now they can't stop, and they run straight through the grass and through the apex of turn 4 right here. And they'll easily take out 4 or 5 cars, right? That happens all the time as well. Assuming you've made it through turn 4 clear and you haven't hit anybody, you still have another concertina effect that's going to happen, which means whatever braking marker you have in mind normally has no relevance on lap 1. Okay? So you have those 3 turns that until you get out of the apex here, you should not even be trying to mess around. If I had my choice, everyone would start this race with the pit limiter on until we get clear of this corner. I really would, because I've seen too many people muck it up because they're trying to gain positions at the start, because that's the easiest place to make positions. Yeah, you're a fool if that's the attitude you come into these first 4 corners with, because all you're going to do is destroy the field. So if you wind up being that person who does that and ignores this warning, I have no sympathy for you whatsoever. So take that to heart, because I've seen it too many times. This is a dangerous starting track. Don't even look to try to overtake until you're clear of the corner number 4. What you should do is just try to stay as close as you can safely to the guy in front of you, and try not to let anyone overtake you. But you really shouldn't be trying to do an overtake until you're clear of turn 4, because otherwise we're going to have incident tickets left and right in both races. So there's my that's my piece as far as the race start here. It's super dangerous. Now, my view of this track is, I have 2 broad views that I'll share with you that I have of this track. One is that this is a track that encourages timidity. And by that, I mean that in most of these corners, you can carry a lot more speed than you realize. But the track, based on its design, gives you the appearance and the feel that you must be going slower in order to get through it safely. Okay? And as we walk through this, I'm going to try to explain to you what I mean corner by corner on that. That the track wants you to be timid, and you have to fight that urge and find ways to keep your speed up. Okay, so that's one overarching point. The second one is that it absolutely demands precision. I don't care what approach you ultimately decide to take on this track, but you must choose one, and you must be precise about it. Practice doing exactly what it is that you want to accomplish over and over again, because there are multiple ways to handle this track on a lot of the corners, and you don't want to get caught in the middle not knowing which one you're trying to do. Okay? So I think this is a great track for to illustrate different driving styles, because you can attack it in 2 fundamentally different ways, in my opinion. So I think it's great for that. But I think you have to understand by the end of the week where you are mentally, and as far as your driving style and how you want to attack this track, and then absolutely try to drill that approach in, so that you can be very specific come Sunday and race day. Okay, so approaching T1. This is a hot lap, so my braking reference is as far forward as it will ever get. As you pass the 100-meter board, right? You see the red line in front of us and the turn sign, the very helpful turn sign letting you know, just in case you didn't realize it, there is in fact a turn coming up. Um, the red line is essentially what I'm aiming for, and how close I get to it depends on how much fuel I have. So right now, obviously, I'm as very low fuel, so I can get extremely close to the red line. At the start of the race, and when I'm running, a full tank, then it's going to be backed up just a little bit, right? And it's the first one where I think we can illustrate how two completely different styles can be used on this corner and a bunch of others. Okay? So, when I said at the beginning that I think that Zandvoort encourages you to be timid, this first corner is a good example of that because it is a hairpin. It wants you to overslow the car. Okay, so it tricks you with the shape of the car, with the narrow width of the track, with the curbs that you have to avoid, the gravel you have to avoid, and it really narrows everything down for you and forces you to go slow in order to get around it, right? However, at the same time that it does that, it also gives you a hell of a lot of positive camber to work with, right? So a lot of the trick to this track, or at least to a lot of the corners, is to understand how much that camber helps you and allows you to carry a lot more speed than I think your brain wants to believe. Okay? So there's a huge mental leap I think you have to make that it's like, look, I can go faster through this corner than I think I can. And the reason is because of the amount of camber that's in these corners. Okay? Right here, the track is really pulling you in towards the curb because of the camber, right? So what does that mean? That means you have a couple of different approaches, I think, on how you can attack this corner and a couple of others, right? And one is I will call the braking approach, and two I will call the accelerator approach. My choice is the accelerator approach because that very much fits my style. I tend to be much more of an early braker, late apex, and early on the throttle. Okay, so that tends to be my approach and where I am most comfortable. But that is not the only way. So if you look, when I go on braking on this, I try to hold the car out to the left and to the center for a very long time, right? Um, because I am trying to create a late apex. So you can see how early I am off of the brake on this corner, right? Um, that also allows me to get back on the throttle sooner and modulate the throttle to control the front end of the car. Okay, and let me explain that why that matters. Because when you get to mid corner on this, and that camber is in full effect, right? The nose of the car wants to pull into the curb, which you don't want to hit because these curbs are fairly high and they will bounce you around pretty badly. So you want to avoid them. I use the throttle to counteract that oversteer, and that's front end oversteer, right? It's a difference between what will happen on other corners when you're dealing with rear end oversteer. This isn't a case of the rear end wanting to step out. This is a case of the front end wanting to step in because of the camber, right? And if that's happening to you, if you find yourself mid-corner and the nose wants to pull into the curb and you find yourself bumping it, that's an excellent indication that you are not carrying enough speed through the corner, right? So what I do is I hold the car out there as long as I feel like I can, and then I try to transfer very quickly from the throttle to the gas. I don't want to coast here because coasting is costing me speed. The corner wants you to coast, but you have to try not to do that. At least if you take this approach. Um, I want to slow the car enough to get into the corner, but absolutely no more than that. So I use the throttle to maintain that speed and keep it off of the inside curb, right? That gives me a late apex, and I'm able to go back on the throttle pretty early, right? That is not the only approach that you can take here, though. You can do much more of a straight line brake approach to the inside, more to the middle of the track, and intentionally go past the apex a little bit and make it a double apex and V this corner off, right? That's an absolutely viable approach to this, but it depends on where you're most comfortable. Are you more comfortable making up time with the throttle or with the brake? If you're like me, you like to do it with the throttle. That's why I come in wide. If you're someone who likes to make your time on the brakes, you're probably going to take a much more direct path approach into it instead of coming wide like I do. You'll V it off and give yourself two apexes, one earlier around where I am now. You'll go past, extend out just a little bit, then come back in and apex again around here somewhere. Something along those lines. This corner, like many others, also gives you the option, depending on your car, as to whether you take this in first gear or second gear. I think there are a lot of corners on this track that give you that option, and the best that I can say is that you're going to have to play with it a little bit and find out what you're most comfortable with. I take it in first because of the way I approach the corner and using the throttle to hold the nose out and away from the curb. You may find it easier to keep it in second gear so that second gear introduces a little bit of understeer into the car that fights against the tendency of the camber to pull the nose in, right? So that absolutely may be a viable option for you. A lot of different ways to do this. Very little steering angle. I'll just start pulling it into the center of the track. And then I'm getting back on the throttle as quickly as I can and as much as I can to keep the car from front end oversteering into that curb, right? Catch a late apex and back on the gas full throttle as quickly as I can. So yeah, think about it and figure out what approach you want to use. Do you want to find time on the brakes or do you want to find time on the gas? Pick one. Try not to be in the middle because I think that's where you'll run into trouble. Whatever you choose, watch yourself obviously on the exit. You can get out here onto the red and white striped curb a little bit, but you don't want to go beyond that because it ends and you're going to put your wheel off right here. into the sand and to the grass, and that's going to start costing you a lot of time. So whatever approach you choose, make sure that you can get clear here. And let me think. I wonder if, yeah, never mind. Okay, so this little kink is technically turn two, um, and doesn't amount to anything really other than setting yourself up for the little bitch of a corner that is turn three. And why is it so hard? Well, because you have a very narrow track, because it is a sharp but fast turn, right? Because you have a curb on the inside that you can't hit, and you have no runoff on the exit whatsoever. You know, to top things off, you also have a little bit of a crest of the hill right there in the middle of the apex to make things even more challenging for you. So you have a whole bunch of things to deal with. There also is not what I would call a fantastic brake marker at this corner. What I use is a combination of the signage on the left and the red and white curbing. So as I start getting around, as I start getting around the little hitch, right? First things first, my eyes at this point are not to the right side of the track in the apex; they are to the left. I trace the curbing with my eyes because I want to get as far to the left as possible to open this corner up and give myself as much room as I can. So in order to do that, I absolutely must stay out of the middle of the track, right? I use the curb to help myself. When I get to about this point, I've now got the end of the curb in sight and the signage on the left-hand side, the motorsport sign, and I use that. So as soon as essentially the halfway point of that signage, and just before I get to the end of the curb, is where I go onto the brakes, right? But in order for that to work, I need to be all the way out here to the left. And if I can get my tires on that white line, I absolutely will, right? Because you've got to open this thing up. If you close this corner down, you're adding to your trouble, right? So my breaking point is essentially the halfway point of the motorsports sign, and a few meters before the end of the curb. You cannot ride this brake into this corner and expect to survive, because as you come up over the top of this rise at the apex, that's where the back end is going to start getting loose on you. And if you maintain your foot on the brake, you're going to be helping the car pitch forward even more, and taking even more grip out of the back. So you'll be adding to your problems, right? You must avoid the curb on the right-hand side, and you must avoid the grass on the exit on the left-hand side, right? There is no other way to put it. This is an extremely tricky corner that you're going to have to practice a ton before you are comfortable taking it. Okay. Now I take this corner in second. Maybe you're able to take it in third, depending on the car that you're in. But I don't think so. I just don't. I don't think there's enough reward to it to risk keeping it in second or keeping it in third gear. I think you want to drop down into second gear. But if it works for you, go ahead. Um, let's see. One thing I want you to, I don't know how to explain this, but I consider it a very important part of how I take this corner. And it's really about the balance of the car. Let me, Let's go full speed through it, and maybe I can trigger something that will make sense to me. Yeah, okay. I think I have an idea of what I'm talking about. The um, the transition point, right, from left to right is absolutely crucial for this. So I'm all the way over to the left side, right, and I've straightened up and I'm going on to the brakes. But my right hand steering has already started. Okay, um, you you don't want to get too deep into this corner and then have to throw it into the right-hander, because that is going to exaggerate the light back end that is already being caused by the little crest of this hill, right? So I think that's one thing to really be mindful of. That in a way you need to start your steering early, but at the same time you can't turn into this curb. So the timing of it is extremely tricky, and is just going to take a ton of practice for you to get it right. Your What you do with your inputs will absolutely determine how successful you are in this corner. If you're if you're too late on the brake, you're going to lose the back end. If you get up here and you're too early on the throttle and too hard, you're going to lose the back end, right? If you're too harsh on your steering input, right right up here, if you're too harsh on your steering input, you're going to put yourself into the curb on the right hand side, which is going to put you into the wall on the left hand side. So you need to figure out exactly when and where all of your inputs happen on this corner. I don't think it's one that you can mess around with, or it's going to cost you in the race. Know exactly where you're going to brake, exactly how much, exactly when you want to come off the brake, exactly when you want to do your steering and how much, exactly when you want to get back onto the throttle and how much. I think you have to know those things to be successful on this corner, because there are just too many things about it that will toss you off. Throttle application here absolutely has to be smooth. You cannot be mashy on this throttle. If you are, you're going to spin the car. Uh, period. And you must respect the exit, because if you get out over that red and white striped curb, you are absolutely going to put your tire into the grass, and you'll be lucky if you get the car stopped in time before you run head first into that gray wall out there in front of us. So that corner demands your respect, pure and simple. Okay, this is this is another one very similar to the first hairpin, that encourages you to be timid, and you have to find a way not to be timid. Very similar also in that you can approach this either with a throttle first approach or with a brake first approach, right? As usual, I am a throttle first approach, so I make a very concerted effort after my exit here to get over to the right side of the track as far as I can, right? My brake marker, I use the Assetto Corsa signs on the right hand side. And let me go to my view real quick. So you can see the top signs and the bottom signs, right? And it's the top signs that are really my cue. So before I get to the end of that sign, you can see that I'm about halfway up the lettering, basically, is what my visual cue is out of my peripheral vision as I come to this point. Um, I come over to the right because I am trying to do a late apex and control the speed with the throttle. If you are taking the brake first approach, you will probably stay further in than I do and straight brake farther into the corner, and again kind of V'ing it off and giving yourself a double apex for this corner. That's absolutely a legitimate approach as well. But for me, I try to get it out as wide as I can, and both the turn one and this corner, I am trying very, very hard not to overbrake because this corner makes you want to overbrake because of the shape of it, because of the lack of room, because of the curb, because of the wall, you name it. It wants you to slow more than you have to in order to take this corner. And just like the first turn, if you find yourself bumping up against the inside curb, chances are you are over slowing the car, right? So you can combat that either by doing a double apex and V'ing the corner off, that allows you to make a much sharper turn, keeps you away from the curb, and makes it easier to take a shape to the corner where the curb doesn't come into play, right? But if you take the throttle approach like I do, then it's critical for me that I don't overbrake going into the corner, and I get back on the throttle as quickly as I can in order to modulate the front end so that the camber of this corner, just like T1, is not pulling the nose into the curb. I'm trying to maintain speed, maintain speed. Don't let the nose get turned in too far. If I ever find myself coasting in this corner, I know I've done something wrong. And then right around here at this point is where I'm sure you'll start to feel as you start going back onto the gas. I don't understand exactly why this is the case. It has to have something to do with the shape of this corner, and maybe if we had free cam, I'd be able to really look at it and tell. But to me, you're starting to go uphill a little bit, which means that the car's going uphill, you're on the gas, so the weight is settling back on the back. You should have a significant amount of grip on the back end, but for whatever reason, the back end really likes to move around on this exit. So you absolutely have to respect the throttle on this exit more, in my opinion, than you do on turn one. The approach on them to me is very similar, but I think you have to be much more mindful of your throttle application on this one because for whatever reason, the back end likes to get nervy on you coming out of this exit right here. But as soon as you're able, get back full throttle, straighten up the wheel, and get yourself moving. Work yourself all the way out to the right side. You can get out onto this curb on the exit. A lot of the time I don't. This is about as far as I frequently get. You can get out there, but obviously you don't want to get too far or the curb's going to end on you and you're going to wind up in the grass. Let's see. Okay, so the next two bends are pretty straightforward. They're all full throttle. So there's not much to talk about other than, from the standpoint of just being neat and tidy. As I'm coming up here, my eye is kind of tracing the white boundary line up until about this point. at which point I pick up the curb on the far side, right? And I'll just look to clip the white paint, basically. Don't want to be any further over than that, but if you can get there, then that will put you all the way over to the right-hand side, which opens up the left-hander and makes sure that you're not scrubbing speed unnecessarily as you come through the left-hander. There's nothing tricky about it though. Just make sure that you're avoiding the curb on the left-hand side here, but otherwise staying as close as you can. At some point in here, you'll get up into fifth gear, and then I'll just aim for the triangle that the white painted line makes just past the red and white stripe curbing. So I'll just point my car right towards it, come up right next to it, start straightening the car out because I do not want to stay inside at this point because we're approaching the fast right-hander, and I want the car as far out to the left-hand side. So I open up my steering to let it drift out to the left side as far as I can so that my car is positioned properly when I get into the braking zone. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Hug it, but then open up the steering here and let the car drift out so that you're all the way out here on the left-hand side and the car is straight when you go on the brakes, right? Because the balance of the car is absolutely critical at the entry phase to this right-hander. Okay. You have a couple of reference points that you can use on this corner, and you can use the end of the red and white striped curbing. You can use the the light pole that's on the left-hand side, just in front of the ambulance, or you can use the orange barrier mark on the left-hand side. I use the orange barrier mark, but depending on how comfortable you are on this corner, you may want to brake earlier than that and use one of the others. It might be better for you to, as soon as you get past the red and white striping, for instance, that as soon as that disappears from your view, maybe that's a better place for you to brake. I'm going to wait until I'm close up to the orange mark on the left-hand side, and as soon as I get up right there, right, I'm going to straight line brake, and I'm going to keep the car out to the left, because as soon as you get into this zone and start turning, the road starts dropping away from you, right? So once again, we're faced with a situation where the road is dropping away, which means the weight is coming off of the back end while you're under braking and beginning to go downhill. That means light back end and very limited grip. And anytime you're in that situation, what you do as far as your inputs go will largely determine your success at this corner, right? So if you're messing up the brake inputs or the steering inputs on your entry to this corner, you're going to lose the back end. And if you're having problems with this corner and your car doing that, that's where you need to start looking, is at your brake input and at your steering input. If you are too far to the center of the track, that is going to force you into a steering angle that is too abrupt and too severe, right? That is going to require more grip than the car is going to have at this point. If you are too hard or too late on the brakes here, then you're going to be adding to the instability in the rear end because you're going to take even more weight off of it than you need to, which is going to reduce the amount of grip that's available to you. So any combination of those will result in you struggling on this corner. It also could be an issue with your setup, but the chances are it's much more likely because your inputs are not yet dialed in for this corner, right? So I would always look at those first before you start messing with your setup too much, you know. Okay, so but for me, I get on the brakes. I try to keep it out here to the left-hand side because I don't want to start turning too much, right, when I'm under braking, because all that's going to do is increase the amount of grip that I'm demanding from the car, and it only has so much, right? So I want as much as possible to be going to braking at this point. So I'm very gentle on my steering input until I get to a point where I can actually start turning in and coming off of the brake. Okay. The other reason is that you do not want to be into this corner too soon, or you are going to have to overslow the car. Because if, for instance, if you're getting up to the white line on the right-hand side, you know, by now, if you're finding yourself, so there's that, see the light over there on the right-hand side. If at this point on the track your car is already up next to the grass, then your turn in is just too early, pure and simple. And you are going to have to scrub a lot of speed in order to hold this corner without catching a lot of understeer and pushing off into the sand on the left-hand side, right? So if you're having problems with that, check yourself and check the width of your car from the right side of the track and see where you're coming in, because I won't actually get to the apex of the corner until I actually get up to the curb itself, right? And by then I'm already going back full throttle. If you're taking this too narrow and forcing yourself to scrub speed, you're going to have to wait a long time before you're able to get back on the throttle. Okay, let's look at this with balance cam and see how the weight transitions. Because weight transfer is critical on this. Okay, I don't know if you saw that, but let's do it again so I can explain what it is that I'm seeing, and watch the balance of the car and how it moves. So when I go into braking, right, the nose dives down, but there's very little lateral motion of the car, right? I'll set the steering at this point, but without really turning in, because right now I have too much weight on the front end of the car, and the rear end is very light, right? So I'll set the steering slightly in order to get the weight moving out onto the left tires, but the majority of the steering has to wait until I reach a point where I can come off of the brakes. So start setting the weight to the outside, let the car settle, and then as I come up off the brakes, the front end then begins to lift up, right? That balances the car out more, and now I have full grip available to go to the turn itself, right? Because now all the weight's going to move out onto the left side tires, and all of the grip that's available is used to corner rather than to brake. Watch it one more time. You'll see the car pitch forward, tilt slightly to the left, and then as I come off the brake, it'll pitch backwards a little bit, and then settle all the way over on the left. There it pitches back. And now I know I can go all the way onto the steering angle and get the weight out there onto the left-hand side. And assuming I've maintained that balance well enough, I'll catch the apex right here at the beginning of the curbing and be able to get back onto full throttle at this point. And the car will have enough grip to hold it all the way through the exit. I had to lift a little bit there, so I didn't catch it perfect, or I got on the throttle just a little bit too early. One of the two. Not bad, just, not quite perfect. The on the exit, I don't really like to get onto the red and white stripe curbing on the left-hand side because it's just going to run me straight off into the sand, and that's not where I want to be. So I generally have a little bit of margin built into my exit on this corner, so that I avoid that. Okay, this right-hander is another, I would say, devilishly tricky corner. As with all corners, get your butt out here as far as you can to the left, because on this one you want all the width you can handle. I use the white line that's in front of us right there as my braking reference, and essentially as soon as I get over the nose gets over it, that's when I get onto the brakes. You also, if you look right in front of us, you have a slight kink in the white stripe on the left-hand side of the track. You can also use that as a braking reference. It very much depends on what your approach is to this corner. Because I tend to be a throttle first person, then I brake a little bit earlier a lot of the time, and I use the white line as a result. But if you're more of a brake first person, you might find that that little kink in the road makes for a better brake reference than I do. It may be more useful for you. Okay, let's go up here to the apex. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay. You can absolutely take a bunch of this curb. What you can't do is get so far over onto it that you hit the second curb that's on the inside there, right? The half circle, if you will. So you can get up onto all of this initial red and white stripe curbing. You can even catch some of the gray grading there. But if you get up onto the second curb that's beyond that, you're almost certainly dead, right? So my approach to this is I like to get the car slowed down early and turned early here so that I can get back onto the throttle early, right? That's not necessarily what everyone's approach is. They may prefer to brake a little bit later and kind of chuck the car in more and probably be back on the gas just a little bit later. But for me, it's much more of an early brake, early turn in, and early throttle. Fairly hard stab on the brake here, but I want to be off of it pretty quickly because I'm going to make a pretty severe turning angle here, and I don't want to still be on the throttle while I'm doing that. If this is a corner that you struggle with, if it's one that you're still getting used to, if you're still new to this track, drop down, take second gear. It's the safest way to do it. But if you're looking for time, you need to get to a point where you can take this in third gear, I believe. So be careful. Don't hold the brakes here too long while you're inputting a very severe turn angle. One of the reasons why I like to do an early approach on this one is because the track, let's see if Helocam shows, yeah, the track opens up, quite a bit on the exit. You have a ton of runoff room, and I think you can really use that because if you look, there's just a ton of room, and I think if you find yourself struggling in this corner, one of the things you should look at is where you wind up on your exit. Because if you find yourself, if you look at your replay and you're back at full throttle, and prepping for the next corner, and you're in the middle of the track instead of coming all the way out here to the left side, then you've got more speed in you there. In my opinion, you're not using enough of the track. It's very common to not use enough of the track on entry. I think this is a corner where it's very common not to use enough of the track on exit, right? So if you look at that, and even I have more room there to play with. What that means is that if you find yourself there in the middle of the track on exit, what that means is that you are holding the steering input for too long, and you can actually open it up sooner than you are. So let's say I had another, meter or so to use. I can probably start opening the steering up right now in order to use that extra space. Instead, I'm holding it, and because I'm not using all that track on the exit and I'm holding the steering a little bit longer, I'm scrubbing a little bit of speed right at this point. So if you look at your replay and you find that, then come back and practice a little bit and just convince yourself, look, open up the steering earlier until I actually have a problem, with the left side of that track. If I start running off, then sure, I'll dial it back in a little bit. But for now, I'm costing myself time because I am oversteering the car and not utilizing enough track on the exit. And that also has the side effect of setting you up better for this next corner, which is a devilish one. Okay, I want to show you my... So from my view, there are a couple of references that I use here in order to figure out my breaking point for this corner. The first one is that on the right side of the track right now, you see that bush that is just past the guardrail. So right now it's at the very far right side of the screen and just on the other side of the guardrail. I picked that up in my view as a way of ensuring that I don't start braking too early, which is easy to do at this corner. It gives me another visual reference other than the actual brake marker itself, so that I know I'm in the right position, as I approach this corner. So I will pick that up and make note of it where it is, And then as I come past it, okay, now I know I'm getting into my braking zone. And there isn't a perfect one at this corner, but I use the helpful turn sign again, and it's very much a judgment call because right there is where I go on the brake. I think if you think about it, and I suppose that's why I use the bush to begin with, that there's a little bit of a timing in helping me judge that my braking point is kind of right in the middle of that bush and the sign itself, right? So I use both of those in my peripheral vision in order to judge exactly where I do my brake. And I think that's right about, I know where it is, but exactly where it is meter wise. So I pass it, I'm halfway, and I brake. You know, that's that's how I do the braking point in this corner. Because I'm not a big fan for the most part of using a braking reference like the sign itself and nothing else, because that reference is so far away from me that it's very hard to judge exactly where your car is in relation to it all of the time. So having two references helps me triangulate the car to a specific point as opposed to just sort of guessing every time I come around this corner if I'm using the sign only. So try that if you're struggling here for a braking reference or something along those lines. Anyway, all the way to the left side of the track, and the wheel never quite gets straight, right? There's always just a little bit of a right turn into it, but essentially I'm straight line braking at this point, holding it over to the left-hand side until I've scrubbed enough speed that I can start turning in. There is something that Eris has talked about on this corner that I think is very useful, and that is to think of this corner as a 90-degree corner. If you look at it on the track map, it it looks like it's more of like, oh, I don't know, 120-degree corner, something along those lines. It looks sharper than what it is. And I think that's another way that Zandvoort encourages you to be timid by the shape of the corner itself, right? It deceives you into thinking that this corner is tighter than it actually is. When the reality is that if you approach this as more of a 90-degree corner, you realize that on the exit, just like the last one, the track opens up significantly to your left on the exit, and you have a lot more room to deal with, right? In your brain, I think you'll have a tendency to overturn the car trying to follow that narrowness of the turn, when in reality you have to sort of disregard the shape that the track is telling you this corner is and create a new shape in your own mind, right? If you do, that will allow you to open this corner up and get back on the throttle more quickly. Having said that, a couple of mistakes I think that you'll make. First of all, you'll get entirely too narrow on this corner. If you want to be successful at this corner, you absolutely must be out here to the left in order to open it up. Otherwise, you really are going to make this corner very, very sharp, sharper than it needs to be. And it's one of those corners where the back end is going to want to move around on you quite a bit. The sharper you make this corner, the more the back end is going to want to move around. So minimize that with the shape that you choose to make it, and make it 90 degrees. The only way you can make it 90 degrees is to get out here as far as you can to the left. If you're in the middle of the track, you've already forced yourself into a position where you're going to overslow the car. Okay? I take this corner and the next corner in second gear. First gear is a viable option in my opinion, but it can also be a trap. If you are too far to the inside here at your entry, you're going to feel like you have no choice but to slow the car and downshift into first gear to take this. And that's absolutely true. But it's not because the corner can't handle second gear. It's because you've put yourself into a position where the corner is so tight that you have no choice but to drop down into first gear. I think it is absolutely viable to come in wide like this and then come in and brake a little bit narrower and go down into first gear. I think that's absolutely viable. But if that should be an informed choice on your part after you've already got your car established out to the left. It should not be something you're forced into because you're positioning the car too far to the right at entry. So get the car out here and then see which one you're able to handle better, either because of your style or because of the way you have the car set up. I personally think that first gear overslows me too much in this corner, but there's also no question that it's much more stable, right? So you're going to have to make a judgment call as to which one you choose. Let's see. So this is one that I'll trail brake pretty much all the way up into the apex and then be exceptionally patient on the throttle. I say so, but really it's the next corner that you have to be exceptionally patient on the throttle. But the point is, you need to understand that this corner now opens up, and you need to start opening up your steering early as well to be able to take advantage of that so that you can get back on the throttle, right? You could see probably based on the overhead I did earlier of how much room I still had to the left side. So this is a corner where I probably have room to start opening up the steering even more than I currently am, but it's just something you're going to have to look at your replays, see how much room you have left to exploit, and whether or not your inputs are allowing you to do that, right? But don't make this corner narrower than it has to be. The next corner is very similar to that one, except a little bit tighter and even more slippery as far as the back end goes. So when I exit that corner, I'm going to come over here to the right side. However, unlike the last corner, I do not want to be all the way out to the right side. The shape of the corner just does not make any sense from the far right side of the track. So you really want to be closer to the middle of the track, or maybe just to the right of the middle of the track as you come to your entry on this corner. It is also one that you're going to have the option to take in either second or first gear. Once again, I prefer second gear, but there are positives and negatives for both of those options. I use the ambulance on the right-hand side as my brake marker. So as soon as I hit the ambulance, that's when I go on the brake, right? I try very hard not to overdo the brake here because I find that at this corner the back end is very susceptible to getting loose, and what I do on the brake it just exaggerates that. So I'm firm on the brake. I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm. It's also absolutely in my mind not to overdo the brake here. I also think you'll get yourself in trouble by braking too late as a result, because that's going to force you to get on the brake too hard, and the back end's just going to start sliding all over the place on you. So what you do under braking here is very critical in my mind. You will make things easier on yourself by dropping down into first, at least as far as corner entry goes, but that may cost you on corner exit. So I'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so because because you have to start a relatively significant steering input, right? Pretty early on this is the reason that the back end is going to be very jumpy on you. So you have to respect that. And if you start finding yourself sliding the back end around on entry, you either need to understand that you're either braking too late, or you're braking too hard, or a combination of the two, right? So you've got to make some sort of adjustment there to take some of the pressure um, off of the grip that you're putting there on the back end, because right now it can only handle so much. So if you if you shift down to first gear at this point, you're going to find that it's much easier for to get the nose turned into this apex. If you go with second gear, you'll have a much greater tendency to carry a little bit too much speed and pick up understeer and make it difficult to catch this apex. So if you decide to take this in second gear, you're really going to have to practice it in order to get your inputs right, so that you can do this corner consistently. If it causes you too much trouble, then probably first gear is the safer option. But that instability that's in the back end does not go away just because you get off of the brakes. This corner, even more than the last one, you must respect the throttle input. It cannot be too early, and it cannot be too hard. And this is where the downside of taking first gear through this corner really comes into play, because your car is going to be at maximum torque at that point when the back end is pretty fishy on you, and you're going to get into some pretty serious power oversteer coming out of the exit of this if you're in first gear and you're not exceptionally careful. So if you decide to go with first gear, be aware of that. The other option that you might try if you're not too sure about which one to do is to downshift into first during the entry in order to help keep the car stable, but then short shift into second right around here around the apex in order to remove some of that torque from the engine to help smooth out your acceleration on your exit and help to get rid of some of that oversteer that you'll get on power. That is an option as well. But be patient. You have no choice. If you're not patient, the back end is going to tell you very, very quickly. And if you get on the If you get on the gas too early as well, you're going to force yourself into understeer and push the car wide out into the grass on the right hand side, and that's going to cost you a ton of time. Okay, the chicane, and I blew right past the one I wanted to point out first of all. Okay, so as you come up to the little crest in the road, right around the 150-meter marker, you're going to see the first white line right there next to the 150 marker. And then you're going to see the second white line, and that's actually in front of the 100-meter marker. Okay, the 100-meter mark is really more accurate as far as the braking point goes, right? But it's off to the left, and I think it makes it very hard to see. So I tend to use a combination of the white line and the beginning of the red and white striped curbing. So I know I'm going to cross over the white line, and then roughly halfway is where I'm going to get hard on the brakes. You do not want to dive into this corner early unless you know you have a car that can handle this curb on the right hand side. And let's get up to it. Because it has the initial red and white striped curb, and then it has another dummy curb on the inside of that, and it's that dummy curb that you can't hit. That thing is absolute death for the Lambo. Maybe some of your front engine cars are going to be able to handle a little bit better, but I doubt well enough that you're actually going to want to attack it. My guess is that all cars are going to want to be right around this point where you have the right tires on the red and white striped curbing, but absolutely no further. So if you get up here to the right-hander and you start steering the car in too early, you're absolutely increasing your chances of getting inside too far and catching the bad part of that curb. You have to avoid that. So when you go into your braking zone here, hold the car out here to the far left side for a very long time until you're past the red and white striped curbing before you really start turning in. That will ensure that your apex on the curb is laid enough so that you catch the correct portion of it and miss that inside curb. Okay? Should be first gear for everyone. This one is just too slow to do in anything other than first gear. The other reason that I think you want to be very wide coming into the entrance of this corner is that it will help to put you in the middle of the track on exit to set up better for the left-hand curb right here, right? I think that it is very easy to get yourself too far to the left on the exit of the right-hander, and that's going to put you into a tough position as you make your entry into this corner right here. Okay, so because this is a combination of corners, you need to think of them in combination. Sacrifice a little bit on the right-hander in order to gain yourself something on the left-hander, which is the one that really counts because that's the one with a straight following it, right? So when you come through the exit of the right-hander, make it sharp and don't let yourself drift out too far. Keep the steering over to the right so that the car comes back out here closer to the middle of the track, and you're not on the curbing at this point already on the left-hand side, right? If you find yourself running into the sausage curbs up there on the top, around your entry, that's why you're not sacrificing enough at the right-hander, and you need to give up a little bit more in order to get your car further to the left to open up the left-hander more. Okay, I'm going to go to my cockpit view because there's something I do at this corner that I think might help you. Okay, so this is another corner very much like the early ones on the track where the camber both helps you and hurts you, right? You have a lot of camber at this point in the corner, which is going to permit you to go much faster than you think you can. By the same token, it will also suck you into this curb. So you have to figure out how to deal with that. I deal with it like I do with the other corners with the throttle. I try to get back on the throttle quickly. But what you do on the brakes here, I think, is also important because it is a corner where it's very, very easy to overslow the car. And if you do, then you're going to find yourself in a position where the camber kicks in just as you reach your lowest speed on the brakes, and the nose is just going to dive right in on you and into the curb, right? I'm sure you've done that at some point where you know what I'm talking about, where you get to this point and the nose just seems like wham, it wants to slam right into that curb. Okay, so here's how I deal with that. I want to go to my view so I can explain exactly what I see. If you take this apex properly and are able to get the car pointed more towards the center of the track, you're going to be able to go on the throttle for just a spurt of throttle right at this point. And you want to, right? Because that's time. You don't want to coast through here if you can help it, because you can go faster. So you want to pick up the throttle right here. However, the tendency is, because that corner looks so tight right here, it's just staring me in the face how tight it is. It makes me want to overslow the car. And the tendency will be to get on the brake, like right here, and start slowing. I use the sausage curves because they're bright and yellow as a visual reference, and I wait until I actually get next to them. When that first one is leaving my peripheral vision, that is when I tap the brakes. That makes sure that I'm not getting onto the brakes too early. Okay. The other thing that it does is it holds the car out further to the right a little bit longer. Okay. And then from there, I'm immediately using the throttle in order to hold the speed and keep the nose from diving in because of the camber, because it's a very long corner in that sense. You've got to be in here for quite a while. And at any point, if you slow the car too much, that's when the front end is going to pull in to the curb, and it's going to upset the balance of the car. So just like turn 1 and turn 4, I use the throttle in order to introduce a little bit of understeer to counteract the pulling force of the camber into the curb. And then basically, as soon as I get far enough out where like the shell sign becomes visible over on the right hand side where it's really getting into my peripheral vision, then that's where I know I can start going back to full throttle. But yeah, the entry to this, I think you really have to be patient on the brake. I think the tendency is to want to brake earlier and harder than you actually ought to be doing. I think you need to delay it and be softer on your brake input right here than your tendency is, because in order to combat that desire to over brake and reduce your speed too much into this corner. And then on the exit, like many of these, you can run out onto this curb. I don't like to use very much of it because it is a weirdly shaped curb, and the Lambo doesn't care for it very much. So I tend to just run up, brushing it. But some cars may be able to handle it a bit better, where you can run out wider than what I can. But you'll have to try that yourself to really be able to tell. Okay, the penultimate corner. It's pretty straightforward. There's not a ton to it. Get out to the left-hand side. The orange barrier marker is my braking reference, and I will get onto the brakes just as it passes out of my peripheral vision. So right there. Okay, I'll get onto the brake. Fairly, um, fairly straightforward, just kind of straight line brake, but not for very long, because you need to get the car turned into this corner, and you don't want to hold the brake for too long. It's a second gear corner for me, but it's a high speed second gear corner. Some people may want to take this in third. I've always felt like second gear was a little bit better for me. In third gear for me, it's a little too hard to get the nose pointed in where I want to. So I'll drop down to second, and I'll be looking to get the tires right onto the red and white striped curb. And I wonder if, I don't know if you can see to me, there is, so the grading that's on the inside of that, the grip from it is a little bit weird to me. Um, so I'm not actively trying to hit that gray grating on the inside. I don't know if there's a little bit of a tilt to it or if it's just an issue with the grip itself. But when I catch that, it can do very weird things to the front end of the car. Um, and that may be specific to a mid-engine car. I can't really say that for sure, but I'm not really trying to hit the gray grating. It's not the end of the world if I do, but weird things tend to happen when I do, so it's not something I'm looking to hit. But just getting all the way onto the red and white striping, absolutely. Okay. On the exit, open up the steering and let the car drift all the way out. And I think there's a tip I may be able to give you on this corner to help you if you're struggling with your setup into this corner. I want the left wheels out on the gray portion here. Okay. And what I'm aiming for is very much in my eye is the point where the gray grading stops and becomes grass, because that is my turning point. Okay. I know that if I get the car all the way out here to the left and I hold it and then start my turn in at the point where the gray ends and the grass starts, um, I have hit my window for the corner entry. Okay. So let me show you what that looks like. So from my view, I'm going to aim straight for where the gray ends and the grass starts, and right here is where I'm really starting my turn in. Okay. The other visual reference I'll give you, you cannot see the apex here. So what I pick up visually at this point in the corner, as soon as I've started my turn in where I want to, right, is I will pick up the white turn sign up there in front of me because it's extremely close to where I want to apex the corner. Um, that gives me a visual reference so that I don't turn the car in too early, which I think is the easy thing to do. Um, I think you want to be aggressive on this apex, but you don't have a lot of visual references, and that helps. So in a way, the way I use it is when I get to this point, I am trying to steer the car around that white sign. Okay, play with it, see if that helps you. You know, in order to get the car positioned where you need to onto the apex when you get up here, because it's very easy to either oversteer or understeer the car at this point and find yourself not lined up properly to catch the apex. And if you're not, that's going to force you to make steering adjustments, to back off on the throttle because you're missing the apex, whatever the case is. So play with those two visual reference points and see if they help you. The the end of the gray and the start of the grass as your initial turn-in point, and then pick up the white sign as soon as you get past it, and use that as your reference for how much steering angle to use in the early part of the entry. As soon as you get far enough and you're able to pick up the curb itself, now you can make the small adjustments that are necessary in order to catch the apex perfectly. You can brush the curb, but you can't hit it very hard, or it will absolutely toss the car around. But if you do it right, you can stay full throttle or very, very near full throttle through this entire curve. And not the end of the world if you run off, but it will cost you some time if you catch the grass on the left-hand side. And and that is Zandvoort. Let's go back and do the full laps. At full speed, do cockpit first. This lap, by the way, was a 35.89, which is a good lap. But I know that I've had 35 like sixes and such on the Delta that I haven't been able to finish off yet. But I should be able to get to those by the end of the week. I think something like a mid 35 is kind of what I'm targeting by the end of the week as far as a qualifying lap. But this is a good solid lap at a 35.8. overhead. And that's it, guys. There's Zandvoort for you. Happy hunting. Let me know if you need help with anything. Otherwise, I'll see you on the practice track. Okay. Now I got to go take care of dinner. So have a good night. I'll see you later. Take care.